Melrose Abbey in the Scottish borders was established by David I, with 13 Cistercian monks from Yorkshire arriving in the area in 1136. It replaced the old monastery at Old Melrose, established by St Aidan of Lindisfarne in the mid-600s. It was destroyed by the Scots in the 800s, when they fought the Northumbrians to take control of the lands. The new monastery was constructed over the next 5 decades, although it had been in use from 1146. Over the centuries, it was expanded, attacked by Edward I, or Edward Longshanks as he was known in Scotland, was an attack launching point for Robert I, or Robert Bruce, against the English, and burned to the ground in 1385, only to be rebuilt over the next 120 years or so. It's the ruins of that monastery we see today. It was burned again in 1544, with graves desecrated. Catholic worship was abolished in 1559, so the last monks at the abbey lived out the rest of their days there, with no new ones arriving. John Watson, the last surviving monk, died around 1590, with the abbey falling into disrepair after the Reformation of 1560 and the adoption of Protestantism in the country. It became a ruin after that. The church choir was reimagined as a church, but with the lands being sold off and further deterioration, a new parish church was built in Melrose. Worship completely ended at the abbey in 1810. However, during the height of the power of Melrose Abbey, there lived a monk within its confines who would become part of local folklore. Married to God and the Church, and having taken a vow of celibacy, he formed an intimate relationship with a lady from nearby Bermerside. This went against everything he stood for, but he'd fallen deeply in love with the woman. Whispers soon reached the ears of the monastery's hierarchy. The monk was taken to task and condemned. As penance, he was ordered to bathe every day, all year round, in the pool in the River Tweed below where the abbey stood. This pool was known as Hayley Wheel, the Holy Pool. The lady in question, meantime, disappeared, and no one knew what befell her. The monk carried out his penance religiously, even breaking the ice on the pool in winter. Throughout, he never told anyone the reason behind his punishment. Following his death, a great deal of significance was awarded to these mysterious ablutions. The legend goes that at midnight, as the moon peeps through a stormy night sky, and torrents descend from the hills, and the Tweed chafes angrily between its banks, an apparition of a lady in white can be seen to emerge with a wild shriek from the former holy pool as the waters part, with one huge wave heading towards Melrose, while the other heads towards Bermerside. The lady is then heard to release a second piercing cry as she descends sadly into the pool once more, and out of sight. It's thought the origins of this legend came from a monk who did indeed bathe in the Tweed every day of the year, without undressing. Another ghostly apparition at Melrose was a Hunderprest, or hound priest. This priest preferred hunting with dogs, rather than spending his time reading holy texts and looking after the spiritual needs of the congregation. When he died, he wasn't missed. He was buried within the grounds of Melrose Abbey in 1196. It was said his ghost would rise from the tomb and wander at night around the lands at Melrose, scaring the monks half to death when they saw him. They prayed in hope this would stop him from crossing the threshold of the abbey, and it worked. Furious, he turned his attention to the town and its surrounding countryside, where he would roam at night. He'd been the chaplain of a lady of some status, and made his way to her bedchamber, frightening her as he murmured and groaned loudly in her presence. The poor woman was terrified. The lady managed to speak to a monk visiting from the abbey and asked him to pray harder on her behalf to see if this would banish the unholy ghost. He promised he would do this. On his return, he, along with a few other monks, went to the graveside of the Hunderprest and began their vigil. However, the 3 monks were frozen and sought the warmth of a fire in a nearby house, leaving the monk alone in the darkness. The priest then rose from his earthly tomb. The creature believed he would scare the monk so much he would run, but after he regained his composure, the monk bravely stood his ground. The apparition rushed at him, roaring loudly, hoping to frighten him so he could go and visit the lady's bedchamber once more. Gallantly, the monk brought out an axe he'd hidden and struck out at the ghost, hitting it on its body. It let out a terrified scream and rushed towards its grave, hotly pursued by the monk, who called for it to remain in the grave for all eternity. The 3 monks had heard the commotion and ran to help, chasing the ghost towards its tomb. The priest sunk into the grave and wasn't seen again that night. In the morning, the monks opened the tomb, and inside were the remains of the monk, with blood oozing from a large wound caused by the axe. The monks removed the body and burned it on consecrated ground. Then the ashes were scattered in the Lammermuir hills. Never again did the Hunderprest frighten the inhabitants of Melrose, but the story of the vampire of Melrose is still told to this day. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.